Well, I want to welcome you both here to CBN News. Wilson, you are facing ethics charges and could lose your realtor license. This is a very important story. Let's start with what happened. Take us through how this all came to be.
Now, in 2023, I felt called of the Lord to run for Stanton City Council. And during my journey running for Stanton City Council, some of the opposition from a different party decided that they were going to scour my Facebook pages and see if they could find any dirt on me, apparently. And they went back to 2015 and they found a scripture that I posted from Leviticus 18:22, where the Lord clearly states that homosexuality is an abomination to him. That was in 2015. Again, my campaign was in 2023.
8 years. So they went back 8 years. Okay.
It's a long time. And nevertheless, so there was this group that really came after me hard. And they were saying some very bad things about me on Facebook. It's my personal Facebook page, as well as my Stanton City Council page. And there were actually some things that we definitely perceived as threats. And I had to go to the Stanton Police Department, the sheriff's office, and so forth. So anyway, I did not win the election. And so we thought that that was over. Then this spring, I received an email from the National Association of Realtors stating that a complaint had been filed against me. And my complainant said that they thought that posting that scripture and other scriptures that I posted is hate speech. And they were taking me to task with the National Association of Realtors. And Michael will be happy to explain more about this, but it's very bizarre in a way. But as we look at what's happening around the world, it's not, as Christians are being persecuted. They even laughed at me when some people said last year that, I was receiving persecution. Well, no one's beaten me up, thankfully, or harmed me, but it is a form of persecution.
Well, can I just ask you, how long have you been a member of the National Association of Realtors?
44 years.
44 years. Have you ever had any issue with the National Association of Realtors?
No, I've not. I have a great reputation in the community. I've served the Lord and honored him in my business. And no.
Okay, so a couple of other questions about this complaint. Now, the complaint was based on a couple of posts, the one from 2015, I assume, and one other more recent one that dealt with issues that are going on in culture right now with women's sports, right?
That is correct. And I'm an ordained minister as well as a real estate broker, and I love preaching the gospel and ministering on social media. My wife and I have a 501c3 ministry. We've traveled to El Salvador, Guatemala, Brazil. I've been to El Salvador 36 different ministry journeys, and I have an obligation and a calling to preach the gospel, and social media is a great way to do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael, jump in.
Well, if I can just highlight here, what Wilson, the way the story unfolds is, like, in 2015, Wilson posts this biblical message. And what's important to note is that we were in the middle of the Supreme Court addressing Obergefell versus Hodges, the Supreme Court decision that ultimately determined that there was a constitutional right to homosexual marriage. But before that case was even argued, that's when Wilson posts this social media message about the biblical view on marriage. And he posts it on behalf of his ministry. So then we fast forward 8 years later, Wilson's just running for city council, looking and advocating, and the positions that he's putting forward are how he can help his city advance in every way. He's not focusing in at all on these issues about homosexuality and those types of topics. But then his opposition feeds this 2015 post, makes a journalist aware of it. And then the journalist tries to bring the issue into the campaign by asking Wilson whether he still stands by his post. So it's really incredible that this whole situation comes out of a Christian being asked whether he still stands by the Bible.
Well, and And let me just ask this question, Wilson, because, and Michael, maybe you can answer it too, but the person, and it doesn't matter to the core of this issue, but I am curious, the person who filed the complaint, do you know who that is? And were they tied to the political campaign in some way?
I'll say we are aware of there likely being pretty good connections between the complainant, and it was very clear that there was opposition from the complainant and relatives of the complainant to Wilson's particular campaign. So yes, it is politically driven, we believe.
And Michael, I want to ask you this, and I'll come back to you in a minute, Wilson, but okay, what are these supposed rules? Because there are people maybe listening to this, watching this interview, and they're thinking, well, okay, so he posts something as a Christian and a minister on his private Facebook, on his personal Facebook years ago, and even if not, even if it was yesterday, who cares? This is the National Association of Realtors. What does this have to do with that? What are these rules that the NAR has that have allegedly been violated? Take us through that if you can, Michael.
Yeah, so the NAR, National Association of Realtors, has a series of ethics rules that guide real estate agents on how they engage in their practice in a way that's beneficial to society, not harmful. So that's the goal. But in 2020, the Association of Realtors implemented a hate speech rule, a rule against hate speech, very vague term. But not only does it exist, but the rule also is designed, the way it's presented, it indicates that it constrains all of a real estate agent's activities. So not just what a real estate agent does when he's on the job or when she's working with a client, but way outside of that, anything that the real estate agent does, the rule suggests that it controls that minister's activity and therefore that individual activity. And therefore, I was going to say, even a minister preaching from the pulpit could violate this rule just by speaking on the scriptures the way that it's been implied in certain situations.
Is that is that something that you're an attorney, that you would say, oh, that's constitutional. That's okay to have this sweeping rule that crosses over into the personal lives and also professional. I mean, you can be a realtor and a pastor, obviously, as you are. Talk a little bit about that, because this seems, if that's true, that interpretation of it, that seems problematic legally.
We have to stand up against large-scale private censorship. NAR is a private association, but it has a monopoly over the large database called the MLS, the multi-listing service that real estate agents use to list houses, to access houses on the market. And I know Wilson could really explain just how crucial the MLS is for real estate agents. But it's a private association, so therefore it's able to do different things that do, in fact, constrain real estate agents' speech. What I'd like to highlight is, the way I see it, this is the de facto removal of our free speech. So we all know that we have certain constitutional rights, but Wilson's story is what happens when large organizations are positioned to take away livelihoods if individuals do not follow their speech code. It really does have the effect of taking away the rights we thought we had.
Correct.
Yeah. Wilson, go ahead and jump into that a little bit. Help us understand, because as a realtor, let's say that the National Association of Realtors says we're taking your license away. Dig into that a little bit more, how big of a deal that would be to you if that were to happen.
Well, it certainly is a big deal. I want to say for the past 44 years that I have been a member of the National Association of Realtors, I've been a proud member. Because the National Association of Realtors has done a great job in many areas. However, in recent years, there are some mishaps and some problems within the leadership of the National Association of Realtors. And in my specific case, and we know of a few other cases across the country where basically the way I see it is, it's persecution and certainly trying to silence my free speech when I can't post these things on my social media or even speak of certain scriptures from the pulpit. But the multiple listing service is extremely important, because that's where we get information about sold properties, properties that are for sale. Certainly any clients, they want their property to be listed in the multiple listing service. And in my area, I have to use the National Association of Realtors. It's a three-tiered structure where if I want to have access to the multiple listing service, I must join the local association of realtors, and I must join the Virginia Association of Realtors, and I must join the National Association of Realtors. And they have the power, they've given themselves the power that if they find me guilty of hate speech in this hearing on December the 4th, that they have the right to levy a fine from $5,000 to $15,000. They have the right to remove me from the membership of the National Association of Realtors, the Virginia Association of Realtors, and my local Association of Realtors, which then cuts me off from the multiple listing service.
I'd like to note too that people who are watching this or listening to this, we have covered at CBN News Pavi Razinen's case out in Finland. Right now in Finland,
yes.
She's a member of parliament. She posted a verse from Romans, right, about this very same issue. And
Right.
that Bible verse on Twitter at the time, formerly known as Twitter, it's now X, posted it there. And now she has been she's in her third legal battle right now, fighting over this Bible verse. This is something that is happening all over the world. But I think in America, a country that has prided itself on a First Amendment, on protecting religious liberty and religious freedom, this sort of case, right, can be seen as potentially a step towards what we're seeing happen in other places. Now, this complaint was filed. You were notified of it earlier this year. You have this proceeding, this ethics proceeding that you just mentioned. Wilson, what do you expect will happen? And Michael, feel free to dive in on this as well and fill in any blanks. But at this proceeding, what do you have to do? What will it look like?
Let me jump in here.
Sure.
And just to start off by saying this hearing should not be happening right now because what Wilson actually said and what he's done, I don't think constitutes any objective understanding of the phrase hate speech. In fact, even I had mentioned earlier that there was a news article that was published about Wilson's 2015 social media post. In that article, it recounts the fact that Wilson highlights that he loves everyone, he serves everyone, and he hates no one and discriminates against no one. But instead, he still emphasized he cannot deny the scriptures. That's not hate speech, I don't think, under any definition. So the proceeding should have stopped from the start. The ethics team has a process wherein they can dismiss an ethics charge, and I would assume that they use it regularly, whenever they find a frivolous complaint, a complaint that doesn't have the right factual allegations to go forward. That's this case. It should have been dismissed right away. But instead, the ethics individuals specifically and affirmatively determined that if the allegations are true, there could be a rule violation. And that means that Wilson does have to go on to this hearing that we're talking about in December, where there will be the presentation of witnesses, cross-examination, etc., all about Wilson's religious expression.
Look,
And what do you expect? So will there be an answer quickly here? How does this work in these types? And maybe we don't know, but you have to go defend yourself. Basically, it's a court. You go and you defend yourself. Will you know right away? Is there a time frame that you have to wait before they will slap a fine on you or dismiss this?
I think it's about 7 days or so that we should be able to have a knowledge as to what the outcome will be.
And, Wilson, what happens? Let's say they come back and they say, we're fining you. You have to pay a $5,000 fine and admit that this was wrong. And if you pay that fine, you're essentially admitting that. What will you do? What will happen?
Well, for context, I'm sure I'm going to be asked if I'm remorseful. I expect that to happen, and the answer is no. I am not remorseful. I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I will continue to boldly proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. From some information that I have garnered online from the National Association of Realtors Ethics Committee, they are looking for someone like myself to come into the meeting and basically with humbleness of heart, and being repentant, so to speak, and that I'm going to be a good boy from now on, and I'm not going to do this again, and that I'm just extremely sorry that I've offended anyone, that anyone's feelings have been hurt, and whatever. Well, I don't apologize for the gospel. I will not do that. And if I'm asked the question, will I continue to post? The answer is yes, I will. It's my right as an American citizen and my free speech that I can post. And I'm not going to be controlled by man. First of all, I serve God. And my real estate career is on down the list. So it is very significant, but we don't really know what they're going to ask. of course, and we don't have any inside information because basically there is a gag order in place, and Michael can speak to that.
Right.
Yeah, Michael, go ahead and give us a little information on that.
There's different provisions that the NAR has that attempts to impose different confidentiality, but I think there's different ways to read those. But you were asking about what's the potential outcome. Really, the outcome should be that Wilson should be found to not have violated the rule. There's no way to say that Wilson engaged in hate speech under the way that the rule is written. So I really do believe they should find in favor of Wilson at the hearing. If not, then I think Wilson will immediately appeal within the National Association of Realtors ethics process and ask the higher internal body to reverse any negative outcome. But I think he should win at the hearing. That's my hope.
If this were to be a loss and the appeal within were to be a loss, would you take this further legally?
We'll evaluate every option. There are different tools that we're aware of and very strongly considering.
I'm adamant about pursuing the case. I believe the Lord has called me for such a time as this to be His voice in this particular matter, and He has given me His peace. I feel strong about this, and I'm going to do everything that I can to expose what is going on and try to right the wrong, because this really isn't just about me. The National Association of Realtors has over 1,500,000 paying members. And so we're all under this same ordinance and these policies that are very binding on our lives 24/7. And I don't think that that's right.
Final question for you, Wilson. How have you kept from being angry, or at least dealt with anger as it is developed in this? Because I know this is frustrating. It's a lot of extra work and a lot of extra stress, I would imagine. How have you dealt with that?
When I first received notice of the complaint, I was really taken back by that. It was it was crushing. It was crushing, and I felt frustrated, and certainly there was some anger. And for 3 days, I spent time with the Lord and seeking Him as to how to deal with this, because I've never dealt with anything quite like this. And how do I deal with this? What do I do with this information now that I have this, that someone has the right to basically end my career for something that I'm not guilty of? And so I spent 3 days with the Lord, and as my emotions settled down, He began speaking to me that there was a purpose in this, and He gave me His peace. And I can honestly say that my accusers, I love them as fellow human beings. I disagree with them, on their position, but I can say that I love them, and I don't have anger and I don't have bitterness. And even during the hearing, I will be able to look them in the eyes and say, I love you as a fellow human being. And I believe that you're wrong in what you're doing and you're trying to ruin my career, but I love you in Jesus.
Well,
This is exactly what we need in our profession. It's exactly the type of gentleman like Wilson Faber. So if I can just highlight, if speaking the Bible is hate speech, we've really reached a new low, because we used to value our professions because of the values that they bring into society, the values like what we just heard from Wilson. So we really need to say no to large-scale private censorship and allow free speech again instead of the censorship that we're seeing.
And, I'll just note as we close here, we're also called, if you're a Christian, you're called to bring your faith into everything that you do. You're called to go into it in that way. And here, these are private messages. It wasn't like you were going into clients and saying, you have to read this Bible verse. You have to do this.
I've never done that.
Right. I mean, it's a really interesting case. I appreciate you both joining us to break it all down today. We'll have you back very soon to talk more about it. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.